Hello, I'm Mayor Greg Fisher, and I would like to welcome you to the fourth segment of our Metro TV series entitled Justice for All, Louisville's Criminal Justice System. It is our intent through this series to provide viewers and community residents with information about the operation of our local criminal justice system and to introduce the key players, the involved agencies, and their respective missions. Today's segment focuses on the grand jury and will include background on the grand jury unit within the Office of Commonwealth's Attorney, the makeup of the grand jury, and the specific process that the grand jury is required to follow in accordance with Kentucky law to issue a criminal indictment. Over recent years, numerous questions have been raised at the local and national level about the grand jury process in response to alleged criminal activity. It is my hope that this segment will answer your questions about this process in a manner that supports our ongoing commitment to the principles of transparency, procedural justice, and accountability. It is also my hope that beyond the immediate viewing audience, this segment will be used as an educational tool for students in the classroom and community groups who are interested in learning more about the grand jury process. To date, Justice for All segments have focused on the role of law enforcement, the courts, and women in public safety and justice-related positions. Each segment of Justice for All is available on the website of the Metro Criminal Justice Commission at louisvilleky.gov/government/criminal-justice-commission. Following this segment, contact information will be provided to allow viewers to request additional information, ask follow-up questions, or provide feedback. So I encourage you to watch and become engaged.
Hello, my name is Tom Wine, and I currently serve as the Commonwealth's Attorney here in Jefferson County, Kentucky. I've also served as a circuit court judge here in Jefferson County. Recently, grand jurors and the service as a grand juror has been in the news. A number of high publicity cases have caused people to say, what exactly is a grand jury and how does one serve on a grand jury? So many people have questions. What exactly is a grand jury? How do I get selected to serve on a grand jury? Those are questions that we hope to answer for you in this upcoming video. The grand jury can be traced to the time of the Norman conquest of England back in 1066. There's evidence that the courts at the time summoned sworn neighbors to present crimes that they had knowledge of. In America, the Massachusetts Bay Colony impaneled its first grand jury in 1630 to consider a case of a murderer of a Mayflower colonist. Today, the grand jury is an example of government by the people. The U.S. is virtually the only common law jurisdiction in the world that continues to use the grand jury to screen criminal indictments. Now, while all the states in the U.S. currently have provisions for grand juries, only about half of the states, roughly 22, actually employ them, and Kentucky is one of those states.
I'm Sergeant Phil Russell with the Louisville Metro Police Department. You know, there are two types of law. There's civil law and then there's criminal law. And of course, the police, we deal with criminal law. When an arrest is made by an officer, that typically, for a felony offense, typically would go before a district court judge. That judge would have a hearing to determine whether or not there was enough probable cause for the officer to have made the arrest. If the judge agrees after that hearing that there was probable cause sufficient for the arrest, he'll then waive that to a grand jury to weigh the evidence. Another way that an officer can present a case to the grand jury is through a direct submission. And in order to do that, typically they have made conducted an investigation. They have sufficient evidence to seek a charge against an individual for a felony offense. And then they go to a prosecutor and present their case to the prosecutor. The prosecutor agrees and says, yes, let's seek a direct submission. So then they go to the grand jury and the officer presents their case at that time.
The accused will appear in district court and a date will be set for a preliminary hearing, at which time a judge will determine if the crime was a felony and whether there is probable cause that the accused committed the crime. After the district court judge makes a determination that there is probable cause to believe a felony was committed, and the defendant committed that crime, the judge will send the case to the grand jury when it's placed on the calendar. A case may be presented to the grand jury directly by direct submission instead of coming through the district court. This is done for various reasons, such as the nature of the charges, urgencies, secrecy, and for the protection of victims or witnesses. Additionally, a direct may be sought if the accused doesn't know about the pending charges and might flee the area before an arrest is made. All residents of Jefferson County are eligible to be summoned as a potential grand juror. The Administrative Office of the Courts in Frankfort sends randomly selected names of eligible jurors compiled from a list that includes all people filing a Kentucky tax return, who is registered as a voter, or a licensed driver over the age of 18. Potential jurors are mailed a summons requiring them to report for jury service in 30 days. To qualify for jury service, a person must be 18 years of age, a U.S. citizen, a resident in the county of the case being tried, speak and understand the English language, not have been convicted of a felony unless pardoned, not be currently under indictment, and not having served on a jury within the last 24 months. In Jefferson County, 12 grand jurors will be selected as regulars, and 8 alternates are then selected to take the place of a regular grand juror if he or she cannot serve on a particular day. A foreperson, who is selected by his or her fellow members of the grand jury, has the duty of swearing each witness to tell the truth and is responsible for signing all the documents that are issued by the grand jury. The foreperson acts as a liaison between the grand jury and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and is responsible for keeping the grand jury operating in an orderly fashion. When a juror is chosen for the grand jury, Kentucky statutes prevent grand jurors from serving more than 20 days. In Jefferson County, the grand jury meets 4 days a week, so they're summoned to serve for a complete month, which is no longer than the statutory maximum of 20 days. They are questioned by a judge to see if there is any reason they could not serve. This is a time when a juror can indicate that they will be fair and impartial. During the month a grand juror serves, they could hear anywhere from 250 to 300 different cases. Witnesses will appear before the grand jury one at a time, and each person is sworn in by the foreperson to tell the truth. The Commonwealth Attorney or an assistant will then question the witnesses about their knowledge of the case. Before the witness is excused, the grand jurors can ask questions. The grand jury receives all types of testimonial evidence as well as physical evidence when necessary. The majority of witnesses before the grand jury are law enforcement officers, as those are the ones generally involved with the investigation of crimes occurring. The grand jury also hears from individual citizen witnesses when those individuals swear out the complaint against another individual. The grand jury can also ask for additional witnesses or evidence, and in this case, the foreperson would notify the Commonwealth Attorney or assistant, and subpoenas would be issued for the additional witnesses or evidence. If a juror has personal knowledge relating to the charge or witnesses, they need to inform the other jurors. This person may abstain from voting, but are not required to do so. Jurors individually are not authorized to conduct an investigation, so all actions must be as a group. The Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution and Section 11 of the Kentucky Constitution guarantees people the right against self-incrimination. If a witness that appears before the grand jury believes that anything he or she may say may incriminate him or her in any way, they may assert their Fifth Amendment right not to give evidence against themselves. If this is the situation, the witness is presented to a circuit court judge by the foreperson and the Commonwealth's attorney, and the court will determine if the question will incriminate the witness. So what happens when a person under the age of 18 has been charged with a crime? Normally, they're sent to the juvenile session of the family court or district court. But depending on the seriousness of the crime, the judge may transfer the case to the grand jury for consideration. The grand jury may return an indictment treating the juvenile as an adult, or may transfer the juvenile back to juvenile court. After the evidence is presented, it's now the time of the jurors to discuss among themselves what they've heard. Grand jurors must consider the evidence as objectively as possible and not let emotions affect their decision. While discussing the case, the grand jury must consider these two questions. Is there sufficient evidence a crime has been committed in this jurisdiction? And is there sufficient evidence the accused committed the crime? At least 9 of the 12 jurors must agree to return an indictment, which means they agree there's enough evidence and that the person charged did commit the crime. If they don't indict, that's called a no true bill. If a grand juror wants to abstain from voting, he must inform his fellow jurors that he will not be voting. No additional grand jurors are called in unless there are 4 or more jurors abstaining. In that case, you would not have the necessary 9 who would vote on what is required for a true bill. Once the decision is made by the grand jury, it must be signed by the foreperson, and the names of all the witnesses who testified must be on the indictment. The completed form is then presented to the court and read by the circuit clerk. All 12 jurors must be present when returning these findings in open court. All testimony and evidence presented must be kept secret unless otherwise ordered by the court. This applies to the Commonwealth Attorney and the Commonwealth Attorney Assistants, all grand jurors, witnesses, interpreters, parents, and guardians of a minor witness. Only 12 grand jurors shall be present when the grand jury is deliberating or voting. Alternates don't appear unless a regular grand jury cannot be present on that day. Then the alternate appears to take the regular's place for that day. The alternates only appear when they are called and scheduled. Otherwise, they continue with their daily life commitments as usual. Violation of the secrecy or presence of persons other than grand jurors while the grand jury is deliberating or voting is punishable by contempt of court. If you, as a juror, happen to be approached by anyone about your participation, you are to politely advise them that you were sworn by the court and instructed not to disclose any information. You should then notify the Commonwealth Attorney or the court of this contact. So what happens once the indictment is returned in open court? The court and the court clerk will assign the case at random to a particular courtroom. And on Monday following that return of the indictment, the defendant will be expected to appear before the judge where the case has been assigned with counsel in order to be arraigned. At arraignment, the defendant will be advised of his rights, and a date for a pretrial conference or trial date will be given. So what happens when there is no true bill or the grand jury decides not to indict? Well, there's at least 2 possibilities. One, the Commonwealth Attorney can decide to present the case again to a new grand jury. There's no limit to the number of times a case may be presented for indictment. Or the Commonwealth Attorney could decide not to pursue the case any further. The defendant will be so advised, and in some cases the defendant would have a right to set aside the arrest and have that expunged from his or her record. I hope the information in this video is helpful to you. If you are called to serve as a grand juror, we have a staff at the Office of the Commonwealth Attorney who is there to assist you with questions about things as minute as parking or as important as what are the elements of a particular charge. The judges who are assigned to hear the grand jury return on indictments each month are also available for questions. We welcome your service and encourage you to be sure to respond to the summons and to serve as a juror here in Jefferson Circuit.